I am a scientist. I doubt you would have heard of the particular brand of work I do, though. I don't work in ordinary, albeit sometimes macabre areas of the human psyche, nor do I busy myself with the work that other, far more mundane areas of this line of work offer. No, I work with the strange, the paranormal. I work with creatures that you see only in your darkest nightmares. I study the kind of things that originate from the furthest and cruelest corners of the earth. I have seen death more times than I wish to admit. It follows me, dancing at my heels and relishing in the bloodshed. Everywhere I go, it follows, giggling madly as the crows sing their hollow, raucous songs. But this is something new. Something that I have never seen before. It scares me, keeps me up at night. I rarely sleep, and when I do, I see them. They're always there, watching me. They have no eyes, yet I can always feel them searching through my soul. Sometimes I catch whispers as if they speak among themselves. I can never understand them. My employer would not want me to share this with you. If he ever found this, I would likely be hunted down to the corners of the earth. I do not care. At this point, death would be better than this existence, if you could even call it that. Constantly feeling their eyes on me, yet turning to find nothing but a fleeting shadow. I can hear them sometimes, you know. They laugh and giggle, mocking me. They watch me when I sleep, staring at me with unseen eyes. Sometimes I can hear them moving around, slowly advancing upon me, yet never touching me. I hate myself for this, for dooming myself to this life. At first, it had been nothing but simple observation. I would visit potential areas where sightings could be seen, document and study my experiences. But rapidly, the work increased. First, it was just harmless spirits, fairies and ghosts. Then, it gradually increased. I loved it though. I felt I was important, that I was someone who was making a difference. Now it's all gone, burned to ash and dust. Nothing left. It had been a cold winter night. I had just returned from a particularly arduous journey and was looking forward to a break. I loved my work, but sometimes it burned me out. Death is constantly behind you in this line of work, and so it can get exhausting. I opened my laptop and decided to check my email. There it was. I have no idea how he found me. Maybe he found out from others. Maybe he scoured the internet. Who knows? There are many ways to find someone, especially when you have the supernatural on your side. But either way, the email was there. The address was titled William Crowheart. I was both impressed and slightly intimidated. Oftentimes, work like this was steeped in gore. You would have to employ multiple different test subjects and even your own researchers into experimentation. If anything went wrong and the researcher was left alive, they could easily inform the authorities of what had happened and who was behind it. Of course, it's doubtful that anyone would believe them, but still, the guy must have had a fair bit of power and wealth on his side to be so careless. I knew that it might have been just an alias, but immediately took a screenshot, just in case. The message was short and to the point. I had to come to a remote island in order to run an experiment on the metaphysical properties of the other realm, and if possible, establish reliable two-way communication between the two worlds. It was called Project Osiris. That got my attention. Such things had, of course, been attempted in the past, but always ended with failure. It seemed nearly impossible to generate a reliable two-way communication system between the dead and the living. And tools such as Ouija boards and the like were just scams. Useless in truth. Sometimes, if a particular spirit had enough power, they could be able to make contact with a willing human. But this was only possible for a few moments, and barely yielded anything useful. But my interest was piqued. I wondered how exactly they would attempt to do something like this. The ticket was already attached, and in a few days I flew off. The island was a remote one, far from the mainland. I will not put the name here in case any of you are idiotic enough to attempt to cross and find the place. The salt water provides protection for you all, for now at least, but once you reach the shores, it'll be useless. I arrived on the island a few days later. The first thing I noticed was the facility. It was a huge, sprawling area. And then I saw them. 2 men and 2 women, both around my age. 2 of them were wearing an orange jumper, typical of someone from prison. I was not particularly surprised. Prisons were often prime areas for those with enough cash to afford to get test subjects. But only 2. I was both unnerved and impressed by the confidence of Crowheart. He truly thought that this experiment would only require these many people. Normally, experiments like these consisted of a lot of trial and error, many times resulting in huge casualties and loss of life, therefore requiring extreme amounts of test subjects. The fact that only 2 were kept allowed for 2 main sensible possibilities. Either Crowheart was obnoxious with complete and utter faith in his work, or that other experiments like this had occurred in the past, therefore allowing him to get to a point where they would only need these 2 subjects. My second guess proved to be correct, as we were led into a sprawling facility set in the middle of a dense, shadowy forest. The sunlight was nil, with the canopies providing no area for light to brighten the atmosphere. The wind howled through the trees, and I recalled feeling as if someone was watching me. This was not a place where humans were meant to tread. That much was clear to me. The other 2 people, the ones that were not terrified of what was going to happen, were both quiet. They likely felt the subtle yet intense changes in the atmosphere. This was dangerous territory, and I was once again both impressed and unnerved. The man's name was Sam Crowheart, the son of the guy who started this. He seemed much more cheerful and enthusiastic at the start than the woman, whose name I learned was Andrea. She was the more skeptical person, looking at everything with a rational scientific mind. Sam told us much about how his family had spent decades perfecting this technique, learning from their mistakes and finally encountering the gem that would outshine all the others. Of course, soon even he had to give in to the cold, unsettling atmosphere and fell quiet. Silently, Sam led us towards the facility. What struck me as odd was, first off, the fact that the facility seemed to consist of a single trapdoor, hidden expertly amongst the grass. I looked at Andrea, who was staring expressionless. I wondered why someone would employ all this secrecy. What was the point of establishing an underground base? Some believed that the deeper you went down, the nearer to the other side you got. I was not sure of the certainty of that claim, but it appeared to me that Crowheart certainly gave credence to it. Whether or not that would bear fruit was up to us to find out. With the eccentricity of all this, I half expected the guy to show up himself. but to my surprise and slight displeasure, he did not. I did not mind for long though. After all, there was work to be done. Crowheart never appeared to us, even as we toiled tirelessly in order to properly prepare the area, but he did seem to keep in touch with his son, who was constantly feeding him information about the preparations. First, they had to set up the machinery. Crowheart's theory was that if we could apply enough power to it, we could theoretically rip a hole in reality, and the machinery was there both to generate the power and to control it. All of that power would be transferred into the subjects. At first, I was shocked. All of that power concentrated into 2 human subjects. I doubted they would survive. But one thing you learn quick in this line of work: sometimes things won't make sense, but they still happen, and our job is to study and learn as much as we can, no matter how outlandish and absurd it sounds. I raised my hand. I do not know why, but somehow I felt sure that Crowheart knew what I was doing. Whether or not there were cameras, I do not know, but a loud voice boomed from the speakers, wherever they were.
Yes, Dr. Northshire.
How will they survive? Placing all that power into 2 people, it should kill them. It will kill them.
No, it isn't that simple, my dear. You see, this isn't ordinary power like electricity or solar energy. Think of a house. Now, that house needs electricity so that things like lights and lamps can work. Now, our world is that house, and the other side is the earth outside that house. This machinery uses the electricity of that house, essentially the power that fuels the world. It is the very thing of life, the soul of the world. It will not kill them. If anything, it will strengthen them.
I stared at him in shock. What he was suggesting. I was not sure whether or not I completely believed him, but I suppose I had nothing more to say about it. He continued to instruct us and tell us more about what he was planning. Part of me wanted to run, far away. Something felt wrong. I had huge misgivings about this, but I was already here. Besides, I had signed a contract. I could not leave. And besides, even if I could, someone with resources like his would track me down in days and kill me in seconds to make sure nothing got out. For days we prepared, slowly stretching out into weeks. First, we set up the chamber, putting all the appropriate safety protocols in place. First, consecration and cleansing. We needed to make sure the chamber was perfectly tuned into the spiritual realm, and so that involved a ton of work. We had to sweep and vacuum and mop until we could see our own reflection inside. The machinery had to be maintained too. The machinery was huge and complex, and it took us a while to move it in. They even sent some people to help us out. What happened to those people, I have no idea, but they looked positively horrified. The next day, once everything was done, they vanished, and our work continued. We continued to keep the place clean, scheduling regular maintenance checks for the technology. We painted special runes and sigils all over the place. Arcane lettering covered the walls as if from some kind of ancient spell book. Enigmatic and undecipherable, yet at the same time seeming to fall perfectly together. During that time, I got to learn more about the others. The prisoners were always kept in their cells, and I never see them outside of giving them food. But my fellow scientists were a different story. Andrea was a quiet person. She loved to read and enjoyed logical puzzles. Debating her over random interesting things were always the highlight of the day. Her quick, witty replies were fun and always had me laughing. Slowly, she warmed up to me. Sam, on the other hand, he unsettled us both. At first, he was nice and all, but his smile was beginning to feel more dark than friendly. It seemed to grow more malicious by the day. He seemed to always keep to himself, even more than Andrea did. Sometimes when I listened carefully, I could hear him speaking to himself, muttering inside his room. There is nothing inherently wrong with speaking to oneself, but listening to him, it was creepy. Something felt very wrong, but I soon learned to ignore it. He was strangely devoted to his father, like not in an ordinary, healthy way. It felt as if he literally worshipped the guy. Every day, whenever he spoke, he always found a way to include a comment about Crowheart in one way or the other, always complimenting him over how he had worked so hard for their family, how he was so intelligent and capable, how he had managed to do this even after others had failed. It was even more unsettling than the whispering, which was growing more and more frantic and frightening by the day. Finally, the day came. We all woke up at 11 in the night. The air was cold and forbidding. The atmosphere felt dark and unpleasant. Andrea and I barely shared a single word as we simply slipped on our warmest coats, which offered barely any protection against the cold, and walked forwards. Sam was already there, fidgeting with the controls from the glass screen. The two prisoners were standing, watching us with wide, terrified eyes. I did not blame them. Something like this would be terrifying for anyone, but Crowheart had promised us nothing bad would happen. While I did find this entire operation bizarre, I decided to trust the guy. We all stared at the clock. Slowly the seconds passed, and finally, only 3 remained. 3. They looked terrified. They opened their mouths to scream at us, seeing what we were doing, but the walls allowed for not a single wave to reach us. 2. They are banging on the walls. The sound is barely audible. I noticed that their eyes were bleeding. Hey, what's going on? I asked, staring at them. 1. The machines began their work. The air shimmered and sparked before my eyes, as a darkness unlike anything else I had ever seen devoured the chamber. And then came the pain. 3 people screamed in unison that night. The air ripped apart with the volume. The walls were soundproofed, but if the pain was so bad here, I shudder to imagine what they were going through on the other side. I screamed, shrieked and flailed on the ground, all manner of poise and dignity leaving me as tears streaked my face. The glass shattered from the sheer force of it. The air rung in my ears, humming loudly to the point of insanity. Blood sputtered from my nose and bathed the ground beneath me. I gasped, feeling the air being driven from my lungs. It felt like someone was stabbing me with a needle in my heart and my mind, rapidly driving it in so fast that I barely had time to recuperate and gather my bearings. It was agony beyond anything I had ever known. All I wanted was for the pain to end. All I wanted was to die, just so I could be at peace. And peace I found for a moment. The pain stopped. The sounds and the screams grew silent. The entire world seemed to drop dead as we saw the lifeless bodies of the 2 prisoners. Those eyes, filled with terror and fear. They will haunt me forever. But that was nothing compared to what happened next. The sound of growling and teeth gnashing together filled the air, as two corpses walked the earth once more.